Hey everybody, it is Neil Pasricha, and welcome to chapter 120 of 3 books. I can't believe we're already up here. We're way up here. We're on the snow moon today. Happy full moon, everybody. We are on the snow moon on February 5th, 2023. Thinking about what makes life important. And you know what makes life important? It's not the stuff that's on social media. It's not the stuff that the news media is trying to get. It's not the negativity out there. We gotta pull a curtain around ourselves. That's what I like to do. That's what I kind of think of all the stuff I do. It's like pulling a little curtain around. You can kind of hear that, like that curtain in the hospital, like that, the little metal clinking around us, and just say, shh, you know what? It's okay. It's okay. We got 30,000 days here. They are finite, they are fleeting, they are special. Let's make space and create space to talk about and celebrate the simple joys that make life sweet. Let's plumb into the depths of wonderful characters and people, inspiring people, and let's dig out all kinds of nuggets of wisdom that we're going to do today with Timothy Goodman. And by the way, on that sort of pulling a curtain around us metaphor, I want to say a big thank you. It's been, as of tomorrow, it's been 2 months since our Book of Awesome came out. It came out December 6, 2022, my first Book of Awesome in over 10 years. Thanks to you guys, it has been a bestseller every single week since it's come out. It has been on over 7 different bestseller lists. The biggest one of all is the Globe's International Nonfiction List. So we have been hanging out with Prince Harry and Michelle Obama and Bono, the bigwigs, and Dr. Gabor Mate. Dr. Gabor Mate's The Myth of Normal has been a bestseller every single week as well. So that's cool. That's a past guest. Bono, not a past guest yet. If you don't have a copy of our Book of Awesome, head over to ourbookofawesome.com to grab one. Thank you to all of you for spreading positivity around. Now, we got a treat for you today. We have one of the most open-hearted, most vulnerable, most beautiful artistic souls I think we've ever spoken to joining us today, Timothy Goodman. Now, by the way, if you have this month's issue of Time magazine, Timothy Goodman drew the cover. If you live in New York City and you saw a garbage truck drive by, that's covered in doodles all over it. Timothy Goodman drew that cover. If you hang out in trendy New York City hotels, Timothy Goodman has done doodle art in some of the lobbies. He has done work for pretty much, I want to say, I can't really say all the biggest brands in the world, but he's done art for Nike, Apple, Google, MOMA, Netflix, Tiffany, Samsung, Target, The New Yorker, The New York Times. He's the author of the Sharpie Art Workshop and the co-creator of several social experiments, including the viral blog and book 40 Days of Dating, who Netflix just optioned the TV rights for it. He has his first solo gallery exhibition, I'm Too Young to Not Set My Life on Fire, was on view in Manhattan in 2021. He recently designed shoes for Kevin Durant. So if you follow basketball, this is a pretty big deal. He designed Kevin Durant is playing in KD15 shoes that are designed by Timothy Goodman. Even though he is, as you'll hear, a Knicks fan, not a Nets fan, but we're going to talk about that as we get into this. What else has he done? He's got a brand new book. That's what we're talking today. The book is wonderful. It is amazing. I've got a copy. I think you're going to love it. It is a graphic memoir called I Always Think It's Forever. It talks about the year he spent traveling around Europe, falling in love, and he's just got this wonderful way of writing. It's like hip hop lyrics, it's spoken poetry. There's always rhymes, and there's really interesting design. He is a deep artistic soul, and we're going to talk about so many things, including couples therapy, navigating stress, staying fresh as an artist, prioritizing creativity, what it means to be a recovering misogynist, how to question our stereotypical tropes about gender, how to mourn past versions of yourself, and of course, the incredible Timothy Goodman's 3 most formative books. Are you ready to flip into chapter 120, everybody? Let's get into it. Let's go.
This is nothing more exciting than going to a basketball game at Madison Square Garden. It's just like, you see the celebrities, you see Spike Lee yelling at a referee. Like, there's just an energy in the place. People really care for the team. You go to Brooklyn, it's kind of like they just, maybe once the kids have gone, like maybe once a generation pass of Brooklyn Nets fans, then there'll be some sort of, but there's still just like a feeling of like they adopted a team from New Jersey, and it's nice to have a team of Brooklyn, but it's going to take a generation to kind of feel that like that real fandom for the team. There's a lot of like people like salty Knicks fans that have kind of like transferred over, kind of like, so I think, you don't feel that energy for the Nets the way you do for the Knicks, of course. It's just,
Yeah, I thought you, when you told me you were a Knicks fan a second ago, and I was telling you I was a Raptors fan, I thought you were going to say you were a Cleveland fan.
no,
Like
I
you're
gave
from
up
Cleveland, right? So
Yeah.
how'd you not end up like a LeBron Cavaliers type of fan? Well, when were you born? You're like 1980, 81?
Yeah, when I was a kid, like I loved the Cavs. It was like the '90s. They had a great team a lot of the times. Mark Price, Brad Daugherty, Larry Nance. Like they had this squad. I kind of gave up sports for a while when I kind of became when I thought when I was like, oh, I'm an artist now and I'm going to art school and like I'm yeah.
Because you
It just
painted houses in Cleveland, like $1 million houses for like 5 years after high school, right? Like I heard you chat
yeah.
with Debbie Millman, and she titled it sort of like barely finished high school, 5 years of
I
like
did. Yeah.
painting like you said $1 million homes. You got into like the art of it, and then
hmm
then you moved to New York to go to design school, graphic
Yep. At
school, design
SVA.
school. What's
Design school.
SVA?
I went to SVA is a school of visual arts. It's the art and
Okay,
design
which is where
school.
Debbie Millman is, right?
She teaches there, yeah. So do I.
Ah, did
No,
you have her as a teacher?
I did not actually. She had this class that all like my friends took, which was a class dedicated to kind of like presentation
Yeah.
for designers and artists, and knowing how to like present your work, talk about your work, talk about yourself. And there was a lot of that kind of stuff. I think she records students. They give speeches in front of the class. She records them. She makes them watch it over to talk about how many times they say or repeat certain patterns and all this kind of thing. I heard it was a wonderful class.
And what do you
But
teach there now?
well, right now I'm taking a break, but me and my friend Jessica Walsh, a colleague of mine, we collaborate on a lot of projects together. We
You
teach a
guys did the
visual.
40 days of dating together?
Yeah, we did 40 days of
I
dating,
really like that.
12 kinds of kindness.
So quick summary, sorry, just there's people listening to this, Timothy, that like
Yeah.
you're talking to the librarians and booksellers and book lovers around the world. So can you just give us a 30-second like what is 40 days of dating?
40 days of dating it was a blog that became a book. This is the book. It basically it was a social experiment that my friend Jessica Walsh and I came up with this idea. We were both single at the time and we were really good friends.
You're like in your mid 20s kind of thing?
Yeah, late 20s, early 30s.
Okay.
And
You're living in New York.
Living in New York.
Where in New York?
In Manhattan.
Okay.
So we came up with this idea. We'd always been friends, but we had completely opposite relationship issues at the time. We were both single, but it was very stereotypical. I was kind of like, playing around, not serious, kind of, quasi, just like, just not serious about, just like really focused on my career, but also like, not always being upfront about my intentions. Just kind of being a player a little bit, and she would make fun of me about that and kind of be like, why are you doing this? Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, why don't you find someone, settle down with? She was the complete opposite. She was, always looking for the one. She'd go on 2 good dates. She was like, I'm ready. I like this guy is, and then she'd get her heart broken a lot. And we were kind of always making fun of each other for it. And it's very, it's very like Sex and the City, New York. Like it very much was like these two single people in New York City trying to find their way, and the dating scene here is, forever awful. And I was I can see now how I was also a part of that being awful. Just like, you're just not serious. You're in your late 20s and you're kind of like in New York and you're just on your career. Anyways, we decided.
You even have a quote about that I actually wrote down. It's around toxic masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, I can't find the quote, but you say something like, I think every guy has to look back and sort of take ownership for, ills he may have caused.
Yeah.
You go kind of on the record pretty strongly about toxic masculinity, which I love, and so I want to. You said that comment, so
I'm in a lot of ways, I call myself a recovering misogynist. Wow. And I say recovering because I'm constantly, being a cishet man in this society, you're always going to be sort of recovering in that sense if you're willing to do the work and unlearn certain postures and behaviors you learned as a kid and as a young adult. So I take ownership of all of that. While there was never anything serious in the sense of sexual assault or something like that, just being a person who was not clear about intentions at time or ghosting people, just being like a douchebag, but Sex in the City, 40 Days of Dating was, I think, an act of trying to figure that out a little bit. Anyways, so we decided we would date each other, Jessica and I, as friends. I put date in parentheses. We would date each other, in quotes, I mean. We would date each other as a form, as a way to observe this behavior of ours and to maybe tackle some of these issues we had in dating. And so we came up with this idea that we came up with these set of rules that we would have to obey for the 40 days that were kind of like the foundation work of a social experiment, which were we had to see each other every day for 40 days. We had to go on a weekend trip together. We saw a couples therapist together weekly.
Wow.
We had to fill out this form that we came up with, this set of 8 questions every day for the 40 days, which was really the foundation for the blog, which became the book, which is every day you go to, if you go to, this is day 20, day 27, Jessica is on the left and I'm on the right.
Yeah.
And you see the same questions, but you see 2 people ask, answer these questions.
I love that. I read those things. It's so funny. Yeah. It's so funny. It's like that old wedding game, or
yeah, and you see how
she thought it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, exactly. And you see how 2 people interpret experiences wildly different, and all their inner thoughts that are happening that they're not telling each other. And we never read what we wrote until after.
Wow.
So we did this experiment, and then we decided, okay, we could release this. What does it look like to release it? We created a website. We're both designers and art directors and artists. So, that part became its own little project of fun, just putting together this content and how it would best, potentially be put together for an audience.
I like it when I grabbed it on my phone. It says turn sideways. Like the first thing it does is such a cool feature. You don't see that on phones very much.
And and we littered it with all the writing, of each day with, things that were, images. So if we talked about going to a play, we'd show images of the tickets, or we'd show photos of, all these things, gifts we gave each other, text messages between us, all this that helped, tell a story in a more comprehensive way. As it was a new, I think we created a new kind of form of storytelling in that sense. This is 2013, 2012, this is like 10 light years ago in social media times,
Yeah.
Like blogs, as you had a blog, like blogs don't pop off like that anymore.
No,
they don't even exist.
I know.
So it's fascinating, it's like,
well, they do exist. I mean, they do.
No, they exist.
Like chapter 2 of this podcast was with my friend Frank Warren, who runs postsecret.com.
Yeah, of course.
And he still gets like millions of hits a week. And yes, he has like a big social media following, but like you can just feel like his people are still there. How about Jenny Lawson, the blog?
Yeah, of course.
She wrote a blog post yesterday that mentioned me, and it's like boom. Whoa. Like it's still like
your thing was like 2010,
2008 to 2012.
Okay.
So I'm like Cake Rex days, fail blog days.
You're like
I'm like Chuck Norris days.
You're like Run DMC, man. You're like a godfather. You're like
I'm still here. I'm still here on Mark Crutches with my tiny little books podcast. By the way, when you
Godfather.
Timothy, when you, not to divert us, but like, I like that you said a recovering misogynist. I have never thought of myself in those terms, but I'm going to apply it to myself today. I want to try it on with you because I think there's probably stuff I can relate to that I haven't quite processed yet. And somewhere in there, you read this book by Kevin Powell called Who's Gonna Take the Weight?
Yeah.
Subtitled Manhood, Race, and Power in America, published in 2003 by Three Rivers Press. Covers like a black guy in a suit with a white dress shirt pushing against what looks like a glass door where he can see his own reflection, like he's pushing himself back, I guess. The title's in blocky lowercase red, orange, yellow font across the center. You could probably tell us what typeface that is. I don't know. and the author's name is writ large at the bottom in like the big yellow caps. This guy, Kevin Powell, was an American writer, activist, television personality, still alive today, born in 1966. In 3 essays by one of the most passionate and eloquent voices of his generation, Kevin leads us to the heart of the searing issues facing us today, from manhood, violence, and gender oppression to celebrity culture and hip-hop. File this one under 305.89 for social sciences / racism. Timothy, tell us about your relationship with this fascinating book.
Well, it was one of the first books that I read. I think I read it when I was like 18 or 19. And it was one of the first books that I ever read that really challenged white privilege for me, you know? And which was something that wasn't in the zeitgeist like it is now.
So you read this when you were in Ohio?
Yeah, I was in Ohio, and then I went to go see him speak at my community college. I went to a community college, Tri-C, shout out, Cuyahoga Community College in Cleveland, Ohio.
What'd you take?
I was taking all kinds of classes. I was painting homes at the time, and I thought I was going to be an interior designer because we worked in all these really beautiful houses, and I was really enamored by it all. But
side note for those listening who can't see Timothy, if you're not on YouTube, he's still wearing a painter's hat.
Yes, indeed.
The hat lives on.
Always. It's always, you're always a version of you. I think we always carry these versions of ourselves.
I'm still blogging, man. I'm still blogging.
Comes out in all kinds of ways.
So you're painting these houses. You're 18, 19 years old. You pick up this book. You then go hear him speak at the community college, and then keep going. I didn't mean to sidetrack you here.
No, well, I grew up in an all-black neighborhood until I was like 12 or 13 years old. So, I didn't even have a white friend until I was, a teenager.
Wow.
So it's very much, kind of coming from that community, only being around, outside of my family, only having black friends, being around, understanding their sensibilities, their culture, their humor, their way of seeing the world and stuff is kind of ingrained in me in that sense because, it's just it's such a rare experience to have.
Even your book, I always think it's forever, which I've read and loved, and it's coming out in January. That's probably when this is going to come out. It is written for those that have not read it yet. The entire frickin' book is written in, like, for lack of better words, hip hop verse.
Well, it's spoken word in a lot of ways.
Sorry, I totally mislabeled it.
No, it's. I mean, it's not exactly a rap.
The whole thing rhymes, man. You're like Dr. Seuss. That's what I'm saying.
So to kind of, then to move to a neighborhood that was, I wouldn't say it was even predominant. Yeah, it was my high school was like 50-50, white and black. But, suddenly I have all these like white friends and calling me by my last name, Goodman. It was a culture shock for me, and they made fun of how I was early on when I moved to that school. And it was just a weird thing to grapple with, to see like, oh, am I wrong? Like suddenly, like I had to think about, like, white people don't have to think about race ever. The same way men don't have to think about misogyny or sexism. The system's built for us.
The majority doesn't have to think about the minority.
Yeah. And so I don't have to think about how these systems are stacked against me because the system is in my hand. But because I think because I had that experience growing up, when I read Kevin's book at 18, which had only been, 5 or or 6 years since I had moved away from the neighborhood I grew up in, it really spoke to me because it felt, it wasn't foreign. Like, it was shocking in a lot of ways, but it also wasn't. It was something that was very much I understood, and I never really had to grapple with the idea. You know, it was just I didn't have some great reckoning because I kind of grew up. So I was like, oh, this incredibly makes sense. This is I think what that book really talked about for me was how the intersection of race and sexism and all these kind of isms, how they all play into each other. And those were wild kind of concepts for me to start thinking about, and how, you know, this guy was talking so openly about how he had been abusive in his earlier years, you know, and how what he was doing, and talking and reading a man talk about going to therapy, you know, and this is 20 years ago. I hadn't, you know, being 18 or whatever, I just had never read a book that was so that he, you know, he's really showing all his scars and warts and everything, you know, and his vulnerability and his pain and his regrets as a man, you know, and the way he's played into the violence in this world, you know. It was really eye-opening for me. So it made me want to, you know, any great book will, I think, in these kind of ways, will make you want to look in the mirror and ask yourself, how am I playing? How am I contributing to these, you know, these issues, and what can I do better, and all of that.
So many questions, but what issues did it make you see inside yourself at the time that you were therefore kind of newly unhappy and aware of, perhaps?
Yeah.
And as someone who, like me, I'm going to try to try on that label with you today, recovering misogynist, you know, what are some ways you'd point someone like me? What kind of questions would I, you know, what are some good introspective questions to sort of try to figure that out for anyone listening, or for me?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you have to ask yourself, I think, how are we playing up stereotypical tropes of men and women and gender roles, you know, first and foremost, because it can be in such a minute way, you know, that, you know, even the way I interact with my partner, my girlfriend, you know, we talk about it a lot. Like, oh, are we doing this because I'm a man and you're a woman, and this is how we've, you know, been conditioned to think about things and take on these roles? What does it mean to do it in a different way?
Yeah,
you know,
I know. When my wife Leslie, you know, when people come over, everyone's still surprised that my wife Leslie is always the one barbecuing. And I don't know how to barbecue.
Yeah.
And it's like everyone kind of gives it a glance, and then it's just like, you know. And I was married. I'm embarrassed to say I was married before, and it was the exact same in my previous marriage. Like, whatever woman I'm in a relationship with, they barbecue. They barbecue,
huh?
As an example.
Hey,
like, what are some examples for you?
Oh, and how we're gender bending?
Yeah. Like, where you think we had a Loc Manon on the show. And we've talked a bit about gender with Daniels as well. And it's like, this is a conversation I'm not up to speed on. So I always take the advantage, if I talk to someone, you know, tell me more about what you're exploring in your relationship, but also maybe what, you know, where we need to push.
Well, you know, it's interesting with me and my girlfriend, my lovely, beautiful, talented girlfriend, Tina. We, you know, we're a couples therapy. And it's very much about, listen, all of us are different. Relationships are hard. I think we've been kind of taught that, you know, as men, especially, like, you know, cishet white men, especially, like, to not, you know, therapy is weak, crying is weak.
Yes.
Boys should, you know, go and play football and talk about war and all of this shit. And, you know, to be with someone.
Those are two big ones you mentioned, therapy and crying. Those are huge. I have little boys, and I want them to see me cry, but I don't cry. I don't hardly ever let myself cry. So whenever I close, I'm like, I'm crying. You should cry too, because I feel like even traumatically, I'm holding it in for them. But, you know, you open those things up in your writing and your poetry and your design. So it's nice.
I mean, I mean, that's how you asked me specifically about my relationship. I cry. I'm not afraid to cry. Uh, my girlfriend cries too, but I am the more sensitive person in this relationship. Um, she is kind of, I don't want to say she's kind of more mask or something, but it's just, I just am more sensitive in that sense, and we're learning a lot in couples therapy about these kind of things. It's really beautiful.
When does a couple know if they need couples therapy? Leslie and I are not in couples therapy, but what questions to ask to know if you need it, or was this the first time for both of you in couples therapy?
Yeah, I've never been in couples therapy. I've been in therapy for, on and off for 12 years.
Yeah, I've been in therapy for actually exactly 12 years too.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. Although I'm on a new therapist.
That's hard.
So that's very hard. My other therapist retired after 10 years.
Wait, so really? Tired of you?
No, retired.
Oh, retired.
Stopped working.
I thought you said they were just tired. They were like, listen.
Well, he did say many times, like, I don't know if you want to keep coming back. I'm supposed to like kind of turn you back to the system,
How does a couple know? I don't know. I think it's hard for me to say, to speak for anybody else. I know a lot of couples who go to couples therapy and nothing on the surface is wrong. It's just kind of a need to be proactive.
Yeah, that's how Leslie and I think of therapy. I think everybody should be in therapy.
Yeah, of course.
And
same, I agree.
And couples therapy, that's a question for you. Should every couple be in couples therapy? What made you guys go? What made you guys start to think about it?
I think that we are a little bit, we're in different places in our lives and different ways, in the sense of so I just think that there were some things that we are kind of talking about interpersonally that I think we weren't quite sure, we weren't quite aligned about. Not like any major thing. It's just about like personality things and ways we deal with stress and ways to not put that on to each other, which can be so easy, and it's tricky because obviously being in love, being in a serious committed relationship, your partner has direct access to your wounds, and that is not easy to navigate, and no one should think that it is. And so having a professional and having a safe space to kind of discuss this with the professional mental health care worker is just really important,
Oh man, your partner has direct access to your wounds. Wow.
Right?
Yeah, Leslie and I, on the stress thing, early in our relationship, we realized that when we're stressed, we both need energy. Her way to do that is to try to turn to me for extra help and sort of therapeuticizing stuff. And my way to get energy is to conserve my energy. So I'm like unavailable.
Yeah.
So we're doing the same thing, but we're doing it totally in a different way. And so we've learned how to navigate that, to call that out, to discuss it.
Yeah. And Tina and I, when it comes to having any sort of conflict, even the smallest way, I have like an attachment disorder, given my family and stuff and some traumas from childhood. So my kind of go-to is to latch on and kind of want to like talk about the issue like immediately. And I can be a little like overbearing. And her part of her trauma is to kind of get away and to not deal with it right away, and she just needs more time to process.
I'm like her, and you're like my wife.
Yeah, and then that creates a conflict.
Yeah,
because then I'm like, why aren't you why don't you want to talk to me
we
about
got to
this? Why
figure
don't
this
you know,
out right now. I don't want to go
yeah.
5 more minutes without this hanging, you know? And the person's like, I need 3 days to think about it.
And then I'm kind of like, well, does that mean you don't love me? Does that mean that, you know, we're not like, so then it triggers all these other things that have nothing to do with the relationship. It just has to do with your own baggage.
Man.
And yeah.
I'm so grateful to you for your openness. You know, I read that, I'll kind of transition our conversation now, because I do really, really want to talk about Chronicles Volume 1 by Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan, baby.
Published in 2004 by Simon & Schuster. You know, I have the book. I found it in a used bookstore in downtown Toronto. I've got a white hardcover. It's like totally white. The back's just like a black and white portrait of the young Dylan, christened Robert Allen Zimmerman when he was born, in 1942. And the front picture is like a black and white kind of Times Square, like fluorescent neon lights, of almost the cliche stereotype of like a boy in the foreground, like looking out. So really what this is like this guy's memoir written in, you can tell he wrote it. And this guy won the Nobel Prize of Literature.
The only singer-songwriter musician to ever win that prize.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, no one's even.
Have you watched the announcement of that prize on Wikipedia?
It's incredible. No, you mean his speech? It's like 26
no,
minutes?
not his speech. Where this like kind of like, woman in another language like pops into like a party room, and like the whole tuxedo crowd is like, what the heck? Like they're like really happy, but they're like so confused that Bob Dylan just won the Nobel. They thought it was going to be like Alice Munro or something, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about your relationship. Oh, by the way, 782.42. Everybody, you guys can file this under art/music/vocal music. So where does your relationship with Bob Dylan and Chronicles kind of sew into your relationship with moving to New York, your work and art and genius work and your design work, and these relationships we're talking about that we've opened up with 40 Days of Dating and kind of, so then, take us into Bob Dylan and all of this.
Well, Bob Dylan, this book is, one of the main reasons I decided to have the courage to leave Ohio and move to New York City and become an artist and to go after being an artist, and reading about his journey in 1962, coming from Minnesota, feeling like he was destined. And he says that word, to do all the things he felt like he could do.
His visualization was so deep that he like knew it was going to happen.
Oh yeah, it's wild. And Bob Dylan once said something like, artists must always be in a state of becoming. And as long as you can kind of stay in that realm, you'll sort of kind of be all right. You know what I mean? And that's something that is carried with me because I'm an expressionist. I'm an artist, I'm an illustrator, I'm a muralist, I'm an author, I write on Instagram, I write books, I write on walls, but I do these social experiments.
Expressionalist?
I'm an expressionist. I do these social experiments. I just have to get the things inside out, and they come out in all kinds of different forms. And I need to talk about what it means to be a human, the human condition and what it means to be trying to navigate this life and all this. And I think, Bob Dylan is a big inspiration for me in that way because I think he's done the same, and also what it means for an artist to stay, afloat for 60 years like him, still making albums that are getting nominated for Grammys in his 80s. Constantly feeling the need to make and put work out into the world and touch people. That longevity is really inspiring to me now. As now I'm, 12, 13, 14, 15 years into my career. The book, Bob Dylan means everything to me. I have a tattoo on my leg.
Can you show us the tattoo?
I have pants on. So
where on your leg is it?
It's like above my knee on my thigh.
Oh, you got a thigh tattoo.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And so
I have a lot of tattoos. I have like 25 tattoos.
No, but what's the Dylan tattoo of? Is it of Dylan?
Yeah, it's like, well, it's my friend Mira Mariah, Girl New York, at Girl New York on Instagram. She's an incredible tattoo artist. She has a very specific style that I love. She's given me
Girl
like
in
10.
New York. That's
Girl New York, Girl
Girl
New
in New
York,
York.
but New York is spelled with an like a K, like new, like KNEW, New York.
Okay.
Um,
We'll put the handle in the show notes at 3books.co.
yeah, and it's very much her style, but it's Bob Dylan, the specific 1960s, like April 1966 Bob Dylan with the kind of iconic hair and the long
Oh.
fingernails and smoking a cigarette. But yeah, man, he's gone. You know, there's so many. If you know anything about Dylan, there's just like so many. There's these moments. It's like, oh, there's the folk Bob Dylan for 3 years, and then there was the rock and roll Bob Dylan for only like 2 years, year and a half, and then there was like kind of the country Bob Dylan after that, and then there was the 1970s kind of like revised version of Bob Dylan back, and then there was the Christian years of Bob Dylan, and then there was the really bad years in the 80s, and then there was then he kind of like he was reborn again in his like late 50s, in the mid 90s, and it's been pretty going strong ever since then. So uh,
Wow.
there's just all these versions, and I think about that as an artist, like you know, it's very easy to get pigeonholed, and it's very easy to find yourself without even knowing you're doing it, kind of appeasing to an audience, appeasing to, your clients or whatever. And there's more for us,
What percent of what you do is what you do? Can you just tell us, for people listening, like what percent is like corporate murals? What percent is like speaking? What percent is like
Mm,
what percent is like just drawing for like how do you think about that? Like for me, it's like I can tell you it's like this much podcasting, this much blogging, this much speaking, this much.
yeah.
Is that something you even think about when you try to carve out yourself or your life as an expressionist? How do you keep the fuel
No.
and fire balance in, accordance?
I wish I knew. If anyone has any answers, let me know because it's difficult, man. There's times where you find yourself burning out, and you have to, so much of my new book, I always think it's forever. Um, uh, that book is off the heels of a year in 2018, that I was severely depressed and burned out from grinding myself into the floor for so
You're doing
long
murals
working.
for Ace Hotels, McDonald's. You're doing like all these huge corporations. You're doing Patriot Act with Hassan Minaj. You're doing like you're doing crazy stuff on your social media. Like just even keeping those little videos up is like full-time job. You're like Casey Neistat.
I don't know about that,
But you're
but
like hardcore on your videos. Like your videos are awesome.
Mm.
And you're, writing a book and you're
Yeah,
so then what's the cure for that then?
there is no fucking cure, man. It's just like you got to try to find your balance, and you got to try to check in with yourself, and you
Mm-hmm.
got to make sure that you're making time for your life, your
Yes.
personal life. That was, a big thing that I learned, uh, a couple of years ago,
Mm-hmm.
which is what this book is kind of on the heels of, finally showing up for myself, finally doing things for me, whether it's going to Paris, trying to learn French, you know, um,
The memoir is great,
doing,
by the way. Your book is great, even just for the perspective of like a guy in his 30s going to Paris for 6 months. That alone was really nice. It's a nice
mm,
subplot of your whole relationship
y-
side of it.
yeah. No, it was glorious, and there's a lot of privilege built into that, no doubt. But if you find yourself at a place where you could maybe do that, and you could carve time out, you could take time away, I would only recommend it, because it's you got to put things in perspective, right? We're all gonna die. Talk about Bob Dylan. He said something. We're all gonna die. We're just gonna be gone. We're gonna be off the face of the earth. So if you do your work in the face of that, what does that mean? Um, and and that's what I'm in it for. I want to connect to people. I want to, I don't know how I could make a percent. I don't know how I could break up a pie chart percentage. The speaking gigs are great. I don't have any big, I love public speaking. I love being on stage, but I don't I don't make that. My work is my craft, my art, and that's my, whether it's making this book or putting up a big mural or doing a Nike shoe with Kevin Durant that comes out in 3 or 4 weeks.
Wow.
I can't wait for it to come out.
Does he know you're a Knicks fan?
He probably does. Whatever, it's okay. I'm a huge Kevin Durant fan, and of course I ride for Brooklyn Nets.
He's awesome. Cool. He's an awesome follow on Twitter.
Yeah. He does not care. But that's my craft, and as long as I can kind of continue to make sure I'm staying true to that, then all the other stuff is like, yes, I love speaking. I love traveling the world and being able to speak at creative conferences. I want to continue to do that, but I don't want to make that like, that's not, I think a lot of times, a lot of artists, what happens is that you get any sort of notoriety in your industry, and maybe you start getting asked to do podcasts like this and speaking gigs and interviews and all these things. And I think a lot of times that becomes then their full-time job. And then you're talking about how to be inspiring and how to drive all this creativity, but you're not making any more. And that's fine. It's really no judgment.
I relate to this so much. I always say I'm a writer who speaks, not a speaker who writes.
Yeah.
And that's not to just judge anyone who values that differently, but I've held on to that statement in my own brain, because there's times I've noticed where I'll go a period of 3, 6, 9 months and I won't have written anything, and that's fine. But then I feel all tense and I'm fighting with my wife and I'm all ornery because I haven't got that part of my art out of me, and that's my fuel. So, I have to write. So
you have to honor it. You have to honor it.
I have to. That's my medicine.
Yeah.
So if you go out of balance, you also get sick.
I feel really sensitive to that, and I think that and so much of like what happened to me in 2000, like I was doing a lot of that for a while, and I've kind of put the brakes on that. I mean, now I'm doing it because I'm promoting a book that I'm very excited about, of course, but
I always think it's forever.
I always think it's forever.
A love story
set in Paris, as told by an unreliable but earnest narrator. So as you can sort of stay true to that, I think we'll all be okay. But it's tough, It's tough.
Well,
but that push and pull is also part of the journey and what's interesting.
You're talking about speaking, Timothy. It makes me think of your pinned tweet, because on the top of your Twitter, you got a pinned tweet from 2018. It says something like, don't invite me to speak at your design conference anymore unless you're committed to making it inclusive. Will other white designers who get asked to speak a lot make this a requirement too?
Yeah.
So there's another element to what you're talking about in terms of the balance of your life, is that you're trying to also really honor. It's almost like you're shouting your values. Like you're kind of like values led as opposed to even craft led, perhaps.
I never thought about it that way. You're really good, man. You're really good at this.
Thanks, brother. I just really
you're doing your research, like just you doing your research. Just like I just want to give you your flowers right now.
Thanks. No, I that means a lot coming from you, because I know you take your craft very seriously. I think podcasting is a craft. Man, I suck at it compared to Dax Shepard or Rich Roll.
I don't think Mel
Robbins,
like
people.
All.
But here's the thing. I like what I do and I like how I do it. So that works for me. Everyone says make your podcast daily, 5 minutes a day. Well, I release on the lunar calendar, man. And on the lunar calendar, I release 2-hour-long conversations. Like, it's totally opposite of what you're supposed to do. Everyone releases their podcast Monday morning, Thursday night, Monday. My thing comes out like Tuesday at 4:30 a.m. It's like totally screwed up. No, it doesn't fit into anyone's life.
Yeah. You got to go at your own speed. You got to do it the way you need to do it.
Well, talking about values, Dylan was very values led. He was asked about his values when in the 60s.
Yeah.
About his relationship with his family. And he said, I don't have any relationship with my family. And even in 1965, he said, I don't have any family. Even though he had a family, he just said, I don't have a family. I don't have a relationship with them.
Well, he also said some. Oh, sorry. Are you gonna keep going?
Well, I was gonna say that in your book you have this apology to your mom for not having kids, and I was curious to examine both of your relationships with your family. How you think about that?
Well, I was gonna say Dylan said something like, sometimes you're not born to the right parents, and sometimes you're not born in the right place. So, he was on his way home. And so it's interesting to think
His
about
dad
that.
was like a salesman in Minnesota who died young. His mom was a housewife.
Yeah.
They had a great relationship apparently later in his life. And, he said it wasn't anything personal, but maybe the vision was so strong that it just differed from his past. He even changed his name.
Yeah, exactly.
He wasn't Robert Zimmerman.
No, yeah. And I do think that is such an interesting idea to keep afloat in your head, this idea that like you can constantly recreate yourself, and that's good. That's okay. You can do anything you want.
So what's your vision? What's your vision now?
Right now, I'm interested in my personal life. I'm interested in being a good partner to my girlfriend. I'm interested in being a better son, trying to reestablish and reaffirm friendships. These are the things that I'm interested in right now, to be honest with you, because my grandmother's dying of dementia right now, and I was very, very close with her growing up. She's one of the whole reasons I'm an artist. She was an artist. She is an artist. And it's wild to see someone kind of just dissolve in front of you over the course of 2 years. You're kind of mourning a former version of herself, and I'm in a lot of ways, I posted something on Instagram and on Twitter recently about how I'm mourning because of the pandemic, how it's taken years from us. I'm mourning versions of myself, that I don't even know. Now suddenly we're about to be in 2023, and it's like, what the fuck? It was just January 2020. Like, what am I supposed to be doing? What is the world? Because there's this constant demand to produce. Like, we didn't just all go through this collective trauma together, And meanwhile, real shit's happening. People are being murdered in Iran. There's anti-Semitism all over this country. There's, Trump's running again. It just doesn't stop, and it's like you're mad because you're seeing too much of it, and then you're mad if people aren't talking about it, and then you're just it's just there's no way out. So, man, I don't know, I don't know. I'm not working on anything.
Why don't you go live in the forest then?
No, I'm not saying I'm going off the grid.
No, I think that's what we should do. I really do. I mean, I'm telling my kids no phones till you're 18. I mean, don't you want to protect like what little sense of ourself we have left?
No, for sure. But at the same time, I don't want to go disappear in the forest, because I got to be here to fight. If and I don't mean that in a literal sense, but, as an artist, Keith Haring said something about, who's a big influence of mine, like the point of making art is to communicate, it's to contribute to culture, it's to talk about this shit. It's to take these things and mirror it back to society. And so, as marginalized people are being harmed all over this country and this world, it's just I don't want to just go disappear. And it's tough. It's just like it's really unfortunate, and everything going on, everything just with the pandemic, and like I said, like kind of this feeling of like mourning former versions of myself, and this demand to produce. It's just like going back to the Who's Gonna Take the Weight, the Kevin Powell book. One of the things that I still think about with that book is he really examines media through the lens of how, like, the layers that are happening underneath what we're seeing, how we should be questioning them and looking at them through the lens of race and gender and different kind of societal structures. And I think nowadays, because of social media, everything is being thrown in our face, and there's this constant fight about the news, what's real, what's fake, how we're consuming media these days, even how, like, TikTok has changed the way we're putting out content, and the way we're telling
Everything's
stories.
9 seconds now.
Yeah, exactly. And I just hope that we can all be objective and that we can all really be critical about the way we're kind of taking in this media that's constantly penetrating us, through these different lenses. Because for someone like me who does have extreme privilege in this country, it's important for me, as an artist to kind of, we're in the business of consequence. What you put out matters, and it's not all art is political in the way I see it. Everything I do is political in that sense. If I write something on a wall on the streets, and I don't understand, if I'm not looking at it from 30 different ways and I'm offending someone, well, I'm part of the problem then, and I don't know what my point is. I just felt like
no. I actually love it. I love it a lot, and the reason I love it is because I totally get that sense from you. And not to bring it back to this, but
the values.
Again, the values, like on your, not many people. I'm speaking. I'm giving a lot of speeches. I know a lot of people who are giving a lot of speeches. A lot of our mutual friends are giving a lot of speeches. I don't know anyone else who's being as bold and declarative about you as saying, if your lineup is white people, I'm not coming. That's pretty. Have you had much? Like what?
I've had pushback. I've had people. I've told that the people have asked me to speak, and people have tried to explain that, this reason or that reason, there, it's just about talent. The old, the old adage, and well, we're not looking at who these people are.
That's really what they say.
They still say that kind of stuff. Generally,
I thought you were going to say they're saying we only want to have one speaker and it's you, or like we only have two.
Oh no, well that's different. If I'm just being asked to speak by myself, that's different. But if I'm asked to speak on a lineup or on a panel, then yeah. Also, just for the lack of don't we want different world perspectives and just textures to people's experiences?
Yeah.
Don't we want to hear that and be ingratiated in that more? It's just wild how you're still, so yeah. But we're in the business of consequence, man. You write a book, you put it out. You know
who had hard and firm and strong values like you and Bob Dylan? You know who did? Miss Ayn Rand.
in a very different way.
And so I want you to tell us about The Fountainhead now.
Oh my God, The Fountainhead.
Which, by the way, is not a new book for our top 1,000 because you're joining Tim Urban, who writes the blog waitbutwhy.com, and Adam Grant, the Wharton professor. He also picked The Fountainhead as well, as did Chip Wilson, the founder of Lululemon. And a lot of these guys also picked, and Mark Manson of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, he also picked Atlas Shrugged. So I'm just to throw, not to say you're on a panel of all white guys, man, but you're on a panel of all white guys here.
Yeah, but did all these guys pick the book with good graces in mind? I mean, were they all
No, nobody still likes it.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those.
And I'm putting myself in that camp too. I'm a recovering objectivist.
So you were an objectivist.
Well, I never declared myself to be that, but when I was 16, I read The Fountainhead. I thought it was life-changing. I recommend it to everybody. I even have my tattered paperback here with a list of names that I kept of people who've read this book. Number 1, Neil Pasricha. Number 2, Sharon Imeson, the pharmacist I worked with. Number 3, Arlene Stratton, friend of mine in high school. And I made a list of people I liked. I was a disciple.
Wow. That's incredible, because the way I learned about the book was from someone like you, very enthusiastic. Someone who bought me the book and gave it to me, wrote an entire, wrote a whole note inside the book. I still have it. This kid I grew up with, an old friend, he gave me the book.
Wait. We can bleep out his name, but why'd you laugh when you said it? Like, what's the relationship or the memory of this guy? Who's the Ayn Rand evangelist in your life?
He was like the kid. Okay, he was like, we growing up. I don't know if you ever had this experience, but there's like, generally as teenagers, especially my camp, we were up to no good. We were just smoking weed, cutting classes, having fun, like we were just. And you're generally, most teenagers, I think, you're going to 311 concerts and shit, whatever it was. Like we were liberal kids. Like, you know what I mean? We didn't think about the world politics and the we didn't think about U.S. imperialism and like, we weren't thinking about like, I didn't know about, I just didn't think about these kind of things. So he was like this 16, 17-year-old kid who was already a Republican. Like he was like, you know what I mean? He was already like yelling about like fucking, migrants and, watching Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And,
yeah.
Really like pro-capitalist, like,
Mm-hmm.
And he was a very privileged kid. His dad owned a very successful business, and he was.
His dad probably talked politics a lot to him at the kitchen table or whatever.
Probably, yeah. And so here's this kid, and I was, so when I graduated high school and I was painting houses and I started taking community college classes, and he became. Looking back, I was like his little project because we would have fun. We would smoke weed together. But he had all these opinions about the world, and I was still just trying to figure out who the hell I was. And we would meet and smoke, and I was fascinated. He was like very, he's very kind of rambunctious about it all, and very charismatic, and could make a very compelling case about all these things. And I would watch Jon Stewart, and then I would watch Bill O'Reilly to try to get like these different point of views.
Wow, that's a pretty enlightened perspective to have in the late 90s. Like but you were aware that you were getting a slant, even.
Yeah, for sure.
That's kind of right when the news was turning into like divisive news.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. It was like right in the early days of that
Fox News heyday.
And so here he was like, and I'm taking art classes, and he. Gives me this book as a gift when I'm about to move to New York, and says, Howard Roark, great artist, the architect, this might be your journey.
Wow. Wow.
And he gives me this book.
There's a lot of love there.
No, it was a lot of love for sure. Even though, I disagree with this man about just about everything politically. So I read this book and I had a lot of issues with the book, but it was obviously in some ways, as an artist, inspiring to think about how you can potentially keep quote unquote integrity in your work, which I think is also kind of bullshit because I encourage all artists to make money if they can, because we're not a punk band, there's no such, to me, there's no such thing as selling out unless you're only selling out if you're going against your own personal values and morals, or doing something that, or aligning yourself with some sort of corporation that is, outwardly and obviously racist or sexist or homophobic or something, that is selling out. But otherwise, get your bag, make your money. You know what I mean? Like,
and elevate the work we're doing. If I may be so bold to say, you know, like I try to buy from artists and support artists and support art, and I apply that even to things like independent bookstores and even things like your money is your vote. And so you want artists to make money, and you want to be paying artists. We want to live in a society where we do have independent bookstores. Sorry to go on a rant here, because they pay taxes to the local municipality that plants the flowers in our parks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you read this book, you're moving to New York, but you're not Howard Roark. You disagree with objectivism, which is, I think you could say it's like a laissez-faire capitalistic view of the world, right? Like, it's like no government does nothing except police kind of thing. And it's typically enamoring to people of that age who read it, but you had an opposite reaction, and maybe it altered your value the other way.
Well, I already knew in a sense that this idea that I am my own hero and nothing else matters, like this Howard Roark character, and that only thing that matters is your work, for the sake of the work. Something just didn't feel like, again, it goes back to that thing I said about, being an artist, making art is a means to communicate and contribute to society and culture. And I don't mean just in some egotistic way, and that word, that stuff is used a lot in the Fountainhead, egoism.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's actually for people. Like, how are you bringing value to people's lives?
Yeah.
And not to get all on like a soapbox about it, because it's like everything is subjective, but it's like, are you thinking about the communities of the people that you're creating work for? And that's what it's about. And it's not just, well, this is my art and you must respect it, and if you don't, you're stupid, you're an idiot. It just feels really shallow to me.
Have I asked you yet how you define expressionist?
No, I don't know how I define it. I think I define it. We have, as artists, we have this fire inside that you have to get out, and you have to find a way to get it out and put it out in the world, and that's all it is.
So is that your definition of an artist? An artist is somebody with a fire inside who has to get it out?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But I think it has to come out in some sort of tangible form. I don't know. There's a lot of conversation about what a creator is these days because of social media. Or
even a creative.
Yeah. And a writer, a visual artist, a filmmaker, a musician, someone who is creating something that lives by itself, that then I can carry and hold and has its own meaning to me, despite what it meant to the actual artist who created it. I think that kind of transition or something is important in and how we define art or creativity these days. I don't think it's necessarily fashion, of course, plays into that, but I don't know if it's just taking pictures of yourself.
Wow. I'm like emotionally stunned by a lot of what you're talking about, and my heart goes to a place where it wants to go deeper, and I'm also wanting to wrap things up. So I'm wanting to close things off, and because we like to close conversations here, and you've been very generous with your heart today, and I really I feel that, and I really appreciate it. And we like to close things off. It's a books podcast. So we call the people who listen to the show book lovers, writers, makers, sellers, and librarians. And, I can't recommend I Always Think It's Forever Enough. Really what I love about this graphic novel that you've created, or graphic, do you call it a graphic novel?
Graphic memoir.
Graphic memoir. Sorry, that's a better. Yeah, you put it. You might want to put it in a category with like Adrian Tomine. Well, he's more fiction, or I don't know. What's a graphic memoir? Mouse, I guess, or Persepolis, those type of things. Okay.
Yeah.
Or even like the guy who does like Pyongyang and Jerusalem, and those ones, the kind of like travel memoirs. But yours is a travel graphic memoir.
Travel through the heart.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I recommend everybody pick it up. So to close things off, we got some fast money round questions for you.
Oh my gosh.
Number 1, hardcover, paperback, audio, or e?
Hardcover, always.
Why?
I don't know. There's just like, ain't nothing like the real thing, baby. Like this is a hardcover. That's what it was made for. I like to think it's the reason I drink black coffee. It's the reason I drink black tea. It's the reason I either drink just red wine or whiskey, straight. Like, I'm just that kind of person. Hardcover.
Genuine.
Yeah.
It's what a book is. When we talk about a
No.
book jacket, when we talk about a book linen, when we talk about book design, when we talk about a book cover, all those terms are about hardcovers. They're all about hardcovers, the flap, the
Yeah,
copy,
exactly. I
what's
was a
on the
book
back.
jacket
It's like
designer.
it's
That was
made.
my first job. We
Yeah.
designed book jacket. It was made for the hardcover first. I want what it was made for.
Ooh. How do you organize your books on your bookshelf?
I like some idea of like a messy organization. I want it to look like it was kind of not meant to be that way, but it's like too perfect to not have been kind of curated that way.
It's kind of like the messy hair look, the purposely messy hair look,
Yeah.
you know, like when the Friends guys first started doing that, it was like,
Yeah.
oh, they're making it look messy,
Yeah.
but it's really
It's
you know,
been
it's like
nice.
$100 haircut, you know?
Yeah, that's how I like
so when I go to your bookshelf, like, so I get that that's the aesthetic. Now, how are you actually lumping the books together then?
One part, it needs to be practical, of course, to get a lot of books, but then there's also there has to be a form of presentation, you know, and you know, so I like to.
Is your bookshelf like right there? Can you show me with the camera?
No, this is just there's just art books here.
Okay.
But at home, you know, with all my books, it's like I like to have I'll have some in a row stacked horizontally and then some stacked vertically, and then I'll have like one or two, like my Alvin Ludwig cover, like, you know, these covers that are that I love, that kind of like, you know, sitting out. Yeah.
And do you have a favorite bookstore, living or dead?
You know, honestly, like I just love McNally Jackson here in New York. It was a bookstore that when I was in design school that I always went to and looked at all the cool, they have a lot of cool art books. I love going and looking just at who creates, you know, has all the new books of memoirs and stuff. And I'm looking at like who designed the book jackets. Cause that's, you know, that's kind of an old, I was a book jacket designer my first job at Versailles.
Are you like a Chip Kidd fan?
Yeah,
or Gray 318?
of course.
Or
Yeah,
like
all of that.
Gray 318. Gray 318 did the Book of Awesome.
Oh, really? He's in London, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he also did like, you know, all the Jonathan Safran Foer books.
Yeah.
And he did, you know, he's like I got very lucky because what happened was my book was supposed to be called The Other Side of the Pillow, Till Pub in the catalog with a pillow on the fucking cover. And at the last second, my editor, the genius Amy Einhorn, she was like, no, it's called The Book of Awesome. And she was right, and she got the design, and she hired this awesome designer. And you know what? Like,
oh, I know the cover.
Like that I've written 10 books, man. Nothing will ever sell what this is the one thing.
Yeah.
This is my big book.
No, man. Shout out to Gray 318. Incredible.
Yeah.
Rodrigo Corral, I don't know who you know he is.
No, give me some, that's why I want your names. I want to follow these people on Instagram.
Well, I don't, you know, I'm a little like behind on like all the new up and comer ones, but Rodrigo Corral was always a big hero of mine. He's a friend. He's done so many books, you know, like from Fight Club to
wow.
like just stuff that's just penetrated culture. Paul Sayre was a big hero of mine. He does like he's done all kinds of stuff.
That's cool. We'll put all these links at the show notes. And if you have more, email me after. Like, I'd love to get a list for people. Because you know what? How often do you get to geek out about book cover designers? You know, that's what this show's all about.
By the way, I did the cover. I did the cover of my new book. I always think
really,
of course, yeah. Every single piece of this book was created by me. Yeah.
Well, no, I guess I know that because that's your stuff. But like the cover, the publishers, did they give you like a proposal?
No. It was all. I gave them the proposal. Yeah.
I've been steamrolled on covers before. I'm not an.
I've heard the horror stories from authors. It's tough. I feel for you.
I didn't want there to be a smiley face on the happiness equation, and they said, well, we're happy. I said, who wants a freaking smiley face on a cover, you know? But they went with it anyway. And, you know, for anyone who's a potential writer, the truth of the matter is you don't have final say as the writer typically. And if you are an artist like Timothy, you may be fortunate enough that you get to do it. I know Austin Kleon, he's now designing his book covers and his book innards himself because he taught himself Illustrator. Well, you have a little bit extra power, so it's worth looking into for writers, you know, like take an Adobe Illustrator class or something. Other than the 3 books we've discussed today, is there any other books you'd like to point our listeners to?
Well,
for any reason.
I mean, listen, read more women. Read more women. We've talked about a lot of men today. Read Lane Moore's book, How to Be Alone. Read Ashley C. Ford's book, Somebody's Daughter, incredible memoir. You know, read Roxane Gay.
We've had her on the
read
show.
Debbie Millman, my good friend. Read my friend Mari Andrew, who, you know, her book, her first book was an incredible smash hit. My Inner Sky. You know, that's a graphic memoir in the same vein as mine. She and I have had a very beautiful friendship for years, and that is really, you know, we really feed off of each other creatively, and I've inspired her, she's inspired me in our work and the way we tell stories through our art. You know, those are the people I'm inspired by.
And then a final bit of wisdom. You've been so generous with your time today. You've been so generous, you know, with your heart. To leave our listeners with, do you have one final hard-fought piece of advice that you'd like to close things off with?
I would just say the thing I was saying before, you know, like, can you find yourself in a state of becoming, you know, how to, as a creative person, as a writer, as an artist.
Oh, that's good. Never heard that before.
Yeah.
And I've never heard you before until this conversation, and it's been a real gift. So I really want to say thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, it's been a gift for me too. I'm honored that you would have me.
Hey everybody, it is just me, just Neil again. Hanging out, my sweatpants, my orange hoodie, on a big brown couch with a bunch of wires around me and my laptop in front of me, listening back to the wise, thoughtful, artistic genius that is Timothy Goodman. Holy cow, lots of quotes jumped out to me. How about I call myself a recovering misogynist? I thought it was just so brave and vulnerable for him to use that language. And, you know, how many of us are in places where now when you look at your past through the lens of today, you see versions of yourself or beliefs you held sacred or values that you held near that, you know, just don't really jive with who you are anymore. It's interesting language to try on. You could hear me in the chat kind of trying that on. But, you know, there's recovering racists, there's recovering sexists, there's recovering, you know, homophobics. I mean, I might even put myself in that camp, thinking about like the language I used on the playground growing up that I, you know, everybody used, but that doesn't excuse it. You know, there's lots of stuff around this idea of thinking of yourself as a recovering something that I think is really healthy, and certainly, if not publicly, then something that's nice to think about internally. 2, your partner has direct access to your wounds. Wow, I thought that was just such a beautiful and powerful way to put it. In a lot of ways, I'm mourning versions of myself. I don't think of it as much in a sad way, but it's nice to kind of, you know, wonder what could I have done there, and maybe use that as a force or as a piece of nitro to kind of power or charge the way you are today. I do find in my life I kind of leave little breadcrumbs all over the place to like kind of reflect back to me parts of who I am or who I was. I think that's partly why I write. I mean, when I revisit the Book of Awesome, which came out in 2010, I hear and see wounds and parts of myself that I don't really remember sharing, but they kind of come through the language because they come through in why I chose to write about crying, for example, in that book, or whatever it was. I did write about crying in that book. But, you know, maybe as documenters, as photographers, as we're always trying to kind of put little places, and it's harder than ever to figure out who you are over the long run because of how algorithmically derived our life is now. I'm reading a wonderful book right now called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff. That's Z or Zuboff. And it's just really blowing my mind open on just how much of our life is dictated for us now. So mourning past versions of yourself is one healthy way to kind of revisit past versions of yourself. I'm going to throw a few more quotes out there. I got lots written down. It's very easy to get pigeonholed as an artist, and it's very easy to find yourself without even knowing you're doing it, kind of appeasing to an audience, appeasing to clients. This is where I kind of went on that adage of I'm a writer who speaks, not a speaker who writes. But for you listening to this, where in your life do you hold on to kind of identities of yourself so that you don't end up in a place where you're serving kind of maybe just financial imperatives without kind of thinking about what you want or what you love? He quoted Bob Dylan when he said, "Artists must always be in a state of becoming," which I loved. And then lastly, which is something kind of a bit of a punch to the gut for me, as artists, we are in the business of consequence. What you put out matters. All art is political. And I was thinking about that afterwards. I'm like, I don't think all art's political. I mean, like, is this show political? Is there anything political about 3 books? And on one hand, no, not at all. We don't really talk politics on the show. On the other hand, maybe it is. Maybe it is. Maybe this is my fight. This is one way that I'm kind of, throwing water in the fire and saying, no, this is how I want to live, right? Maybe that's what we're all doing. Maybe that's what you're doing by hanging out here. It is. If you believe Timothy, it is. Timothy Goodman, thank you so much for giving us 3 more books, actually 2 more books to add to our top 1,000, including number 650, not 850. We're almost at 500 people. Number 650, Who's Gonna Take the Weight by Kevin Powell. That's Powell. Number 8. Why do I keep saying 8? Number 649, Chronicles by Bob Dylan. And then we've got some asterisks. We're going to add an asterisk to The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, which was also chosen by Tim Urban, chapter 22, and Chip Wilson in chapter 19. And we're going to add an asterisk to The Autobiography of Malcolm X by Malcolm X, as told to Alex Haley, which was also chosen by Angie Thomas in chapter 26. Which, by the way, I'm hearing that episode used a lot, that chapter used a lot in schools for anyone that's a teacher and wants to kind of figure out which chapter to use in schools. And that was also chosen by Humble the Poet in chapter 78. Side note, Humble the Poet also has a new book out called How to Be Loved, but it's How to Be Loved, and the D is in brackets. So I think that's a wonderful book. Lots of past guests having books coming out, which is great. Books. We are 4 books here. We are 4 reading here. Thank you so much to Timothy Goodman. Check out his new book. I always think it's forever, the graphic memoir that you've heard described here. I think it's wonderful, and it's a wonderful little journey into Timothy's mind and brain. If you liked his brain and mind, hang out with it more with his new book. And thank you to all of you for listening. Are you still here? Did you make it past the 3-second pause? If so, I want to welcome you back to the end of the podcast club. This is the after party, people. We got this. We got the cover to cover club. That's everybody listening. By the way, cover to cover club members, we are starting to make a list of your names right on the 3 books page. So just email me and say, I'm in the cover to cover club. Here's my name, put it on the page, and we will add you to the page. We're starting small because people have been emailing me for years and I never collected anybody's name. I didn't collect any names. Now I'm collecting names. And then we've also got the secret club, which you can only find out about by calling our phone number, 1-833-READ-A-LOT. I love numbers. Yes, I do love numbers. I love phone calls, 1-833-READ-A-LOT, READALOT. Call me up, leave me a formative book or something you want to talk about. All right, let's kick it off as we always do by going to the phones.
Hi, Neil. It's Robin Quaintance. I'm from Western Canada, BC, a small little island off the coast of Vancouver called Saturna. And I've listened to your shows, every one of them, and I've already commented before on your shows. And I have nothing extra to say because I always enjoy the guests. I love to hear about their books. I love to hear about their lives. And I love to read myself, so it's a perfect club for me. And I wish you luck, and I hope that it continues till when you're in your 50s. Bye for now.
Hey, Robin. Wonderful to hear from you. And I love where you live. Oh my gosh, Saturna Island. Has anyone heard of Saturna Island before? I had not. Saturna Island, Saturna, is a mountainous island about 31 square kilometers in the southern Gulf Islands chain of British Columbia, Canada. You know, growing up, I always used to look at like the west coast of BC, and there was just like this, there's the big island, right? Vancouver Island, which has Victoria on it. Which is the capital of British Columbia. But then there's all these little islands. And it's so wonderful to hear of people living in there. The island was first used by indigenous people who called the island Longnose due to the island's long northeastern tapering shoreline that ends at East Point. The name Saturna comes from Spanish naval schooner Santa Saturnina, captained by Pilito Jose Maria Navarez, which along with the longboat of Spanish naval packet ship San Carlos explored the island's coast in an excursion in 1791. Famous place for whale watching, also the site where Moby Dole, the second orca held in captivity, was harpooned in 1964. Oh no. It's terrible. A Saturna Island Heritage Committee runs a tiny museum in the former fog alarm building. It sounds like a wonderful place to live. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to this Saturna Island. It looks beautiful. It looks beautiful, Robin. Thank you. And thanks for being in the Cover to Cover Club member. Cover to Cover Club. We are going to add you to the list. All right. Now it's time for the letter of the chapter. This chapter's letter comes from Scott Simpson. Hello, Neil. I recently discovered your podcast when I was listening to an interview with Quentin Tarantino, and he casually mentioned that he had been a guest on 3 books, so I thought I would give it a listen. I'm glad I did because I'm really enjoying binging it. In some ways, your show reminds me of a forgotten radio show called Book Beat, which aired on New York's WCBS radio in the 1980s. Don Swaim hosted the show. I connected with him a few years ago when I was working on a documentary, which is how I discovered the radio show. All the episodes are available online in the Ohio University archives. You might enjoy them, so here's the link. So we'll put the link in the show notes here. media.library.ohio.edu/digital/collection/Don Swaim/search. I'll share a short story with you about one of my favorite books, Alma Mater by P.F. Kluge, Kluge. It's the story of a year in the life of Kenyon College, written from a professor's perspective. One of my college professors confessed he would reread it every year before the start of school in an effort to recharge his batteries. After hearing this, I decided to read it. Kluge, who is most famous for writing the novel Eddie and the Cruisers, returned to his alma mater to become an English professor. I Googled him. He was still teaching there many years after the book was published, so I emailed him to get the syllabus for his class. For several years, we had an email friendship, and he would send me the list of books he would discuss in his class. That's how I discovered a lot of great books, and now I have your podcast. Cheers from Scott. Wow, Scott, this letter warms my heart for many reasons, one of which is that, first of all, Quentin Tarantino is such a pearl. He's such a gem. You know, he wrote a new book. I don't think I've even mentioned this on the air yet. He wrote a new book called Cinema Speculation. It's his first nonfiction book. It's like a gushing, nerdy romp through 1970s films. And in the book, he talks about coming on 3 books. He actually writes about his appearance on this show in the book. It's just very gracious. And he talks about how, if you remember that show way back in chapter 72, is it 72? Is it 72? I think it's 72. You know, he talks about how 82. I was off by 10. Chapter 82. He talks about how, Semi-Tough by Diane Jenkins was his permission to be a writer book. And he gives me credit for identifying that to him, although, I think it just came out naturally in the conversation. But anyway, QT has been making the rounds, talking about coming on 3 books. It's very, very kind of him. And I think I relate to QT, Quentin Tarantino, and I relate to Scott, and I relate to a lot of you that are similarly nerdy about all kinds of little things. That's all life is, and we get to point our attention where we want. And so when you want to talk about little islands off the coast of British Columbia, or you want to talk about, this Don Swaim radio show, or connecting with the professor and exchanging book syllabi, that's connection. That's community. That's what makes life special. That's what makes life sweet. I feel that connection and that community here. If you were listening to this on a ride or on a walk, or you are hanging out with me on an airplane, wherever, I'm here. I'm with you. I feel it. I feel the connection. I feel your love. It is very, very, very mutual. Okay. Let us close off chapter 120 now with the word of the chapter. We always go back to our guest, so Timothy, take it away.
And not to get all on like a soapbox about it, because it's like,
yes, indeed, it is soapbox. Soapbox. I was kind of thinking about going with grapple because I didn't realize that grapple was actually a specific hook. A hook. You know that hook that comes out of they throw it out of a boat and it's got like curved edges and it's a grappling hook. So grappling with something is like stick. Anyway, we won't go into grappling this time. You can only pick one word of the chapter. We're going to go with soapbox on this one. Now, you probably know, or you may know, that a soapbox is a raised platform that somebody stands on to make an impromptu speech. You might even know that in the 19th and 20th century, before the invention of corrugated fiber, like i.e. cardboard, before they invented cardboard, people used to ship stuff in wooden crates, really good quality crates. Sometimes you still see them in the corner of like a No Frills, if you know that Canadian grocery store. But they still make these kind of good quality, sturdy, well constructed soap boxes. I guess soap is heavy, so you got to have a good box to carry them. They made portable temporary platforms for street corner speakers, attempting to be seen and heard. But you might not know, and I didn't know, when this got really popular, it turns out that the decades before World War I have been called the golden age of soapbox oratory. Why? Because people didn't have any money. They had no money to spend, and so public speakers who push social or political agendas kind of performed a form of entertainment, right? If you are ever in downtown Toronto and you're at the corner of Yonge and Dundas, which is kind of like the sort of Times Square of Toronto, there are still people doing this type of public oratory all the time. Radical political parties intent on bringing what they perceived as an emancipatory message to the working class were particularly intent on making use of street meetings with their speeches and leaflets up on soapboxes. Soapboxes. So getting up on your soapbox is a figurative way to describe the 100-year-old practice of actually taking a hard pre-cardboard soapbox, turning it upside down, flipping it over, standing up, and putting yourself out there. And isn't that what we're doing here? Isn't that what all of us are kind of doing here? We're up on our soapbox. We're talking about formative books. We're sharing ideas, messages. We're exploring themes. Have forgiveness with me as I explore some of these with you, and I have forgiveness with you for exploring some of this with me. Let's just hang out. Let's be together. Let's have fun. Let's learn. Let's live. Let's love. Until next time, everybody, remember that you are what you eat and you are what you read. Keep turning that page, and I can't wait to talk to you soon. Take care.